Knox had never been one to believe in fairy tales. At 26, he worked as a restoration architect, spending his days breathing life back into forgotten buildings. His world was measured in blueprints and brick mortars, not magic or mystery. That was until the day he received an invitation sealed with crimson wax, bearing a crest he'd never seen before. The letter requested his presence at the Palace of Thornhaven to consult on the restoration of the East Wing. Knox had heard whispers of Thornhaven, a small, isolated kingdom nestled in the mountains, so removed from modern civilization that most people thought it was merely legend. But the payment offered was substantial, and his curiosity was piqued. 3 days later, Knox found himself standing in the grand hall of a castle that seemed to exist outside of time. Tapestries older than memory hung from stone walls, and candlelight flickered despite the afternoon sun streaming through stained glass windows. "Mr. Bennet," a voice, smooth as silk and commanding as thunder, echoed through the hall. Knox turned to see her Queen Alexa, though she couldn't have been more than 24. She wore a gown of deep emerald that seemed to shimmer with each step, and her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that arrested him, violet, impossibly violet, and filled with something that looked unsettlingly like recognition. "Your Majesty," Knox bowed, uncertain of the proper protocol. "Please, follow me," Alexa said, her expression unreadable. "There is something you must see before we discuss the restoration." They walked through corridors that twisted and turned like a labyrinth, each passage more ornate than the last. Knox tried to memorize the route, but something about the palace seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at it. Finally, they arrived at a small chamber, intimate compared to the grandeur they'd passed through. "My daughter," Alexa began, and Knox's eyebrows rose in surprise. She seemed too young to have a child. "Princess Alara, she's 7 years old. 3 nights ago, she woke screaming from a nightmare. When I calmed her, she insisted on drawing what she'd seen." The Queen moved to a desk where a piece of parchment lay. With trembling fingers, and Knox noticed they were trembling, she lifted it and turned it toward him. Knox felt his breath catch in his throat. The drawing was crude in the way children's art often is, but the details were unmistakable. A man with dark hair and Knox's distinctive scar along his left jaw, a memento from a childhood accident. He was drawn standing in what appeared to be ruins, surrounded by flames, reaching toward a small figure. The child artist had even captured the particular way Knox's hair fell across his forehead. "How does my daughter know you?" Alexa's voice was barely a whisper now, but it carried the weight of 1,000 questions. "She has never left these palace walls. We have no portraits of you, no photographs. She has never seen you before in her waking life." Knox stared at the drawing, his mind racing through rational explanations and finding none that fit. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. I've never been here before. I've never met your daughter, haven't you?" Alexa moved closer, studying his face with an intensity that made Knox want to look away. "Tell me, Mr. Bennet, have you been experiencing unusual dreams lately? Visions of places you've never been? A feeling that you're forgetting something crucial?" Knox's mouth went dry. He had been having strange dreams, vivid, recurring nightmares of a castle burning, of trying to save someone, of a promise he couldn't quite remember making. He'd attributed them to stress, to working too hard. But now, the ruins in her drawing, Alexa continued, are of the East Wing. The wing you've been called to restore. It burned exactly 100 years ago. 23 people died, including, she paused, composing herself, including the royal architect and the young princess he died trying to save. That's impossible. Knox breathed, but his conviction wavered. "In Thornhaven, we keep records, detailed records." Alexa pulled an aged leather book from a shelf Knox hadn't noticed before. She opened it to a marked page and held it up. Knox found himself staring at a portrait sketch from a century past. The man in the drawing had his face, his scar, even the same expression he often wore when concentrating on a difficult problem. The name beneath read, "Knox Bennet, Royal Architect." "Reincarnation is not just a myth in these mountains," Alexa said softly. "Some souls are bound to places, to purposes left unfulfilled. My daughter has the gift of sight. She sees beyond the veil of time. And she saw you, not as you are now, but as you were then, in your final moments. trying to save Princess Rora from the flames. Nox's legs felt weak. "This is madness, is it?" Alexa challenged. "Or is it why you felt compelled to accept this commission, despite having no knowledge of Thornhaven? Why the moment you entered these walls, something in you felt like it was coming home?" She was right. Nox had felt it, an inexplicable pull, a sense of déjà vu so strong it made his chest ache. The corridors had seemed both foreign and familiar. And the dreams had intensified the moment he'd crossed into Thornhaven's borders. "What does this mean?" Nox asked, his voice hoarse. Alexa's expression softened, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability in those violet eyes. "It means you've been given a second chance, Nox Bennett. A chance to finish what you started. The East Wing has remained in ruins for a century because no one has been able to restore it. 7 architects have tried, and 7 have failed. The stones themselves reject any hand but yours." She moved to the window, gazing out at the ruins visible in the distance, blackened spires against the mountain sky. "My daughter drew you there, in those ruins, but this time you weren't alone in the flames. This time you were building something. Creating rather than trying to save what was already lost." Nox joined her at the window, staring at the ruins that called to something deep in his bones. "She saw me succeeding. She saw you whole," Alexa said simply. "Perhaps that's the same thing." Nox didn't know if he believed in past lives or prophetic children or any of this. But as he stood there, looking at the ruins that felt like unfinished business carved into his very soul, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't leaving Thornhaven until that wing was restored. Some debts, it seemed, transcended death itself. "When do I start?" Nox asked. Queen Alexa smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "You already have."